everyone, and welcome to my channel Hisame Artwork. Today I'm going to talk to you about color theory like I promised you in the previous video. And this is a monumental, huge subject. You need years of schooling for this, but I'm gonna do it in 10 minutes and it will be oversimplified. So if you have any issues with the way I've presented the information or has been incomplete or something like that, I'm sorry for you. This is going to be a very basic introduction to this subject, and it's more of a I'm gonna throw words at you, tell you what they mean. Hopefully something will stick, so then when you see it next time you'll kind of know more about the subject because you've heard the information before and you can delve deeper into it. I do recommend that all the things I've told you now, you're gonna go and look for more details if you want to learn more about this in depth. So first of all, when I say theory, I mean in the Latin countries, they speak Latin-based languages. What they mean by theory, the word is from Greek. It basically means confirmed law. It's not in English. They've kind of made a mix of hypothesis and theory. It kind of means the same thing when people speak in English. I'm talking more about the theory when it's kind of a science field, which is kind of the normal. I mean, at school, when we say theory, it's like something that's confirmed. It's not a hypothesis. Okay, so I'm gonna talk to you about now the types of color harmony, and I'm gonna show you just so it's easier for you to understand. So I am here in an Adobe website. It used to be called Cooler, now it's Color Adobe Create Color Wheel. I put the link here for you guys, and it's gonna be in the description of the video as well. So you have a couple of color harmony types. You have the analogs, which means colors that are similar. So orange and pink for red. Of course, if you move this, and you can move it like this and select the colors, you can make them lighter, you can make them darker. You can play around with this wheel and select your color palette, as well as you have here some recommendations made by other people that know how to color. So if you're afraid of choosing your own colors and you keep seeing that your results look bad and you don't like what you're doing, you can use a color palette from here. These have been created so that everybody can use it, and it's no problem if you copy paste the values of the colors so you have the same colors. It gives you here the RGB and the hexacode, so you just have to copy paste those into your drawing program and get the same colors. Although I recommend you can play here around and choose something that you think looks good for you. Generally, most people are going to be able to tell what they like. It's just that when you have to paint, painting is a series of little decisions, and you can make bad decisions and have nasty results. So this will help you make better decisions for your color palette. Okay, back here to analogs. Let me show you monochromatic. You have the triad. The triad is pretty complicated. The more colors you add and you have to harmonize, the more difficult it's going to get. Like this selection here, it looks terrible. So you have to fiddle around with it. It's pretty famous, the blue-red combination, which is notoriously difficult to make. There are some country flags with it, so they can't really use the saturated colors. They have to fiddle around with them to kind of try and get some nice colors for it. So you kind of have to figure out what combination you make so that it looks okay. What else do I have to show you guys? Complementary. This is means the colors are in opposition, so you have red and green yellow and blue, and the famous orange and turquoise. Especially this combination here, I saved it for you guys, and you will recognize this from many Hollywood posters. Where was it? There we go, found it. So this is from the Aviator, the height of overusing that kind of color filter, but it looks good. And if you're scared of using colors, best limit yourself to 2 colors before you jump into 3 colors or more. Like I said, here you have several colors. You have the blue and green and red. A rainbow is hard to manage and make it harmonious. So let me show you guys again. So this is the Aviator. It has that combination of 2 colors. This one, and it's a sure bet that is going to work. Again, you can have some purples and yellows and try and make them work. Let me see. Okay, I'm gonna refresh this. So basically, if you add one of these color filters, it will automatically make everything look better. So for example, I've used it here. I think it's called that Nash filter you have on Instagram as well. I used here as well, and it harmonizes the colors. Well, let me find one that doesn't have any filters on it. And automatically when you put a filter on it, it can look better because it limits the colors and they're made harmonious. Nope, where was it? I want to go further. So here is Ivan. It's kind of a reddish tint to it. Josh, it makes all of that icky brown mud that you find in the back. It made it blue, and blue works pretty well with yellow. That wasn't a particularly great shade of brown that went with that yellow. Let me see the original. So it doesn't stand out that great. It doesn't complement it. It doesn't support the main focus of the photograph. So a filter like Josh is a pretty popular filter because it does change the colors and the hues so that it works better for the human eye, the healthy human eye. Of course, there are people who have certain disabilities and they see colors differently. So what is color? Color is what we perceive with our little brains, and what is light? It's photons that go into our eye and then get processed by our brain. I want to talk about pigment versus dye. So pigment is something that goes on top of the painted object, and dye is something that goes within the object. So you have ceramics, or most often paper or textiles, so you use dye in that one. And there are different types of dye, of paints and dyes. For example, a watercolor dyes the paper, while a acrylic is pigment. It paints over the paper. So that's why, for example, when you have watercolor, you can still activate it, add some water, and change the illustration, so you have some editability with watercolor, and you don't have that with acrylics. Paint versus digital. So a lot of the paints are pigments more than dyes. While digital, you're actually painting with light. What you see on the screen is light coming into your eyes from pretty direct light source, while paint is light from a source of light like the sun or a light bulb. It hits the paint and it can diffract, refract, and then it goes into your eyes. So you have some added interaction over there. So This affects or what you can obtain, the intensity, the purity, and so forth of the colors that reach your eye and then get processed by your brain. And this is where I want to talk to you guys about working RGB versus CMYK. So RGB is red, green, blue. These are the primary colors for digital, for light. If you add these three lights on a piece of paper, you will get white, as you may have seen videos on YouTube, while CMYK is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. These simulate, when you're painting in this format, it simulates how it will look when printed, because it stands for the pigments in your printer, and those are the ones that you mix in order to get color. And if you remember from kindergarten, you had red, yellow, and blue, your primary colors. Cyan stands in for blue, and it's a very light blue, and magenta stands in for red, and it's a very hot pink. So let me show you. I will show you in Photoshop because it's easier to turn on and off, and I know the shortcuts. So now I am in CMYK color format. So as you can see, I no longer have access to certain colors. I have a light blue. I no longer have that intense turquoise, and no longer that super hot pink. If I turn it back on to RGB, then the colors are processed differently, and you have that super hot pink here, and also the turquoise I was telling you about. So I turn back on, that hot pink becomes a purple. And this is very important if you're doing, for example, comics, and you want them to be printed at some point in the future. You gotta paint everything in CMYK. It will look a bit duller. You will have to avoid certain colors, but it can be printed and looks okay. If you do it in RGB on your computer and then you print it and it looks like crap, that's because you didn't take into account the color format. And you have to harmonize colors a bit differently for print than you do for digital, because you have access to more colors in RGB than you do in the real life, because CMYK simulates real life, and there are certain colors that you cannot have in real life because they're very intense, and you need certain lighting and light sources in order to reach those intensity of colors. I'm not saying it's impossible, it's just that you are more restricted. And for example, most people are gonna read your comics at a normal light bulb. They're not gonna get a high intensity light bulb just so they can read your comics. So have this in mind. Okay, go back to this, what I gotta tell you guys. So when you do color harmony, grays are your friend. And what I mean by gray, I mean things that because it really depends on how you put colors next to each other. They influence your perception. So for example, this illustration here, I think all of you will agree it looks better than this one over here, and that's because I've taken care for the colors on the left side to harmonize as opposed to the right side. And if I take here the color, it looks to you like it's black, like both eyeglasses are black, sunglasses, sorry. But as you can see here, it's not actually black. It's a dark desaturated blue, while this one is pure black. As you can see, the little indicators here, the hexa is 0, that is pure black. You can't actually get that in real life. There are very few chemical substances that are pure black, that have the pigment has the ability to absorb all the light, and it's very expensive, and it's not going to be in the art shop where you can buy it to paint it. So most colors in the real world will be less pure than what you can get in digital. So, like I said, here's the hexa. You can see it's pretty far away from black, but when you look at the whole composition, it seems like black, and that's pretty much the core of color harmony. Is you have colors that look good together, but they're not actually what your brain thinks they are. Your eyes see this, and your brain processes the information in a certain way, and it can be a bit misleading, and you might not know why this thing looks better than the other, because apparently they seem the same. So I do recommend you often use the eyedropper tool. The shortcut is alt key. It's the key alt on your computer for Windows, and you check and see what the colors are, so you always know what they are. Okay, I'm gonna increase that so you can see that wheel there better. And as you can see, I am selecting the colors, they are changing, and you can see each of the color how they are. Okay, other thing I wanted to talk to you about, what I find really good in Clip Studio Paint and why it's a program that I recommend it so much, is how it processes the colors, because this is also very important. How does your program process colors, and how do they interact with each other when you add blending or effects or other things like that? And in my opinion, Clip Studio Paint manages this better. The programming, the code is better in Clip Studio Paint than in Photoshop, and I'm gonna give you a simple explanation to show you more punctually what I mean. And then I'm gonna also show you this illustration and explain more in depth why this worked in Clip Studio Paint and not in Photoshop. Okay, so you have two colors here. You have red and green, and they're the same purity. So they are super saturated. You can see it's on this little corner here. It is, you can't get more saturated than this. It's super pure. Like if it was a pigment, it would be just straight out of the bottle. And if you turn it to grayscale, this is a very accurate depiction of how colors are light in real life. So green and yellow are more high energy wavelength than red. Violet is even higher, but I'm talking about red and green. So when you desaturate these, this is pretty accurate how this part here is gonna be a little bit lighter than the red part. And also you have this really nice and smooth transition between one color and the other, and it's doing great. This is what you should be getting when you mix these two colors together. What you get in Photoshop is something else, and it's incorrect. So again, same saturation, same colors. I took the hexa code here, so be sure that it's the same two colors and I'm doing this correctly. And what I'm doing now is going to take out all of the color, Control Shift U, and I've turned it to grayscale, and immediately you can see I have this weird black line between them. So if you want to blend colors, it will desaturate it, make it yucky, make it look like a muddy brown. And you might want this, you might not. When I'm drawing digitally, I do not want this. I want the maximum potential for color, because I can always go down. I can always desaturate something intentionally. This is desaturating it unintentionally, and I'm not getting the best colors that I could be getting in a medium like digital. I can understand this happening between cheap pigments when I'm painting. If you have quality paints, it will not do this. Um, but it's more complicated when you're doing with pigments because a lot of those colors are derived from chemical elements and they can react between each other improperly. In theory, they shouldn't be doing this because they've been made to not react. Because, for example, there are certain chemical substances you get yellow with, I don't know, red, and it comes out green because the chemicals are reacting. Uh, when you are painting with paint, you don't want that. You want when you add yellow and red to come out orange, not green. Okay, so first of all, I'm getting this weird line here, which is an error on their programming side, as far as I understand other people discussing this issue in Photoshop. And also, I really can't tell the difference between one gray and the other. Here, one is lighter than the other, and here they look like the same type of gray. Because this is the maximum saturation that you have. Like I said, here it's super saturated, and they're both at the same limit, which shouldn't be what actually happens, because in reality, like I've explained with the wavelength, of course I've simplified all of that. If any physicist is watching this and is horrified about my incorrect explanations, please feel free to leave more details in the comments below. Okay, so this is what happens in Clip Studio Paint, and I find this more desirable because I have more freedom, more possibilities for my coloring. And this is how we get to this illustration. And I just want to tell you guys about the blending that happened in the background and how bright and colorful, and what a nice transition I have from this green over here to this pink. And for those of you that have been working for a couple of years in digital painting, you will notice that not all programs can have such a nice smooth transition from one to the other. So when I saw what Clip Studio Paint could do with the blending for these two colors that are pretty difficult to blend without getting brown, I was super impressed. So for those of you that do coloring or things like this, Clip Studio Paint is another reason to want to use the blending in it and the colors that you can achieve without losing saturation, without getting pretty nasty colors. It's uncomparable in my opinion. I am so much happier with what I can do in Clip Studio Paint than in Photoshop. So yeah, that was it. I think I covered everything. Photoshop versus Clip Studio Paint. Yeah. So hope you found this informative. I'm sorry if it seemed a bit confusing. It was a lot of information to take in. This is just an introduction, just kind of a little bite out of color theory. So again, I recommend using coloradobe.com create color wheel. And I do recommend learning more about this. If there's a photograph that you like, maybe use Pixelromatic to harmonize the colors a bit more. That way you can understand more why you like something, why you think something is good, and how you can find out how to do what you already have to make it better so the colors look better. It's important to have an understanding of color theory and also the program that you're using and the capabilities of that program. Now, Photoshop is pretty good at this as well. I mean, there are very few people that are gonna notice the difference. Very few people that are gonna be upset of the results. There are plenty of good things you can do in Photoshop, but for the money, I just think that Clip Studio Paint offers more in terms of well, options it can give you. It can be a pretty cumbersome program to use at times. For certain things, I do go back to Photoshop simply because it's more user friendly. But I do often use Clip Studio Paint for line art and for colors and blending those colors because it does it much better. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and see you in the next video. This series was a request by Mana Up, and more videos will be coming soon. As always, feel free to leave requests in the comments below. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.